Right now, your thoughts control you, but they were always meant to serve you. This audiobook will show you how to break free from mental autopilot and reclaim the power to choose your own reality. Own Your Mind. Audiobook by Rowan March. Published by Inner Impact Books. Introduction. The constant chatter in your mind never truly stops. Even as you read these words, another voice is already commenting, evaluating, perhaps even questioning whether this book will be worth your time. This endless stream of thoughts, judging, planning, worrying, remembering, forms the backdrop of every moment. Yet rarely do we pause to examine this mental soundtrack that shapes our entire experience of life. This unquestioned thought stream has likely led you to react in ways you later regretted. Snapping at someone you love during a moment of stress, procrastinating on important goals despite knowing better, or lying awake at night as your mind spins through worst-case scenarios. These reactions feel automatic, as if they're happening to you rather than being chosen by you. Science helps explain why this mental grip feels so powerful. Research on the brain's default mode network reveals that our minds are wired to generate a continuous flow of thoughts, predictions, and interpretations. This biological function, essential for human survival and planning, can also trap us in cycles of reactivity when left unchecked. The thoughts feel inseparable from who we are because they've been our constant companions since childhood. But here's what's rarely acknowledged. This prison of reactivity exists only because we've never learned to question these thoughts or recognize the space that exists between stimulus and response. This space, what we'll call the response gap, isn't something you need to create or achieve. It's already there, a natural capacity you were born with, waiting to be rediscovered. You might be skeptical, having tried meditation or been told to just think positive without lasting results. This book offers something fundamentally different. Rather than attempting to control or eliminate thoughts, you'll learn to transform your relationship with them. This isn't about adding another practice to your already full life. It's about recognizing a freedom that's been there all along. The path forward isn't about becoming someone different or achieving some elevated state of consciousness. It's about reclaiming what's already yours, the ability to respond to life rather than merely react to it. This journey begins with a simple but profound truth. Your thoughts have been controlling you for so long that you've forgotten a fundamental reality. They were always meant to serve you, not master you. This book is your path back to that natural order. As we proceed, you'll discover why willpower alone has failed to create lasting change and why traditional approaches to managing thoughts often backfire. More importantly, you'll experience firsthand the difference between being trapped in thoughts and being able to observe them with clarity that leads to genuine choice. The freedom you seek isn't found in controlling your mind, but in understanding it so deeply that control becomes unnecessary. This understanding isn't theoretical. It's practical, immediate, and transformative. It's time to rediscover your power to choose response over reaction, clarity over confusion, and purpose over pattern. Chapter 1. The Autopilot Mind. You're driving home after a long day at work, and suddenly you realize you've traveled several miles without any memory of the journey. Your body navigated turns, stopped at lights, and responded to traffic, all while your mind was somewhere else entirely. This common experience reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness and the relationship between you and your thoughts. This autopilot mode isn't limited to driving. Throughout your day, a constant stream of mental activity runs in the background, planning, worrying, remembering, judging. These thoughts feel so intimately connected to who you are that questioning their authority might seem impossible or even threatening. After all, if you're not your thoughts, then who are you? The answer begins with understanding how your mind evolved. The human brain developed its capacity for complex thought as a survival mechanism. In our ancestral environment, the ability to anticipate threats, remember past experiences, and plan for future scenarios gave us an evolutionary advantage. This mental machinery served us well when immediate physical dangers were common. But in today's world, this same mechanism often creates unnecessary suffering. Your mind continues to generate thoughts constantly, scanning for problems to solve even when no real threats exist. It's like a security system that never turns off, alerting you to potential dangers that rarely materialize. This endless stream of mental activity is so persistent that most people never question its necessity or authority. Think of your mind as a television that's been left on 24 hours a day since the day you were born. The programming never stops. News, drama, comedy, horror, all playing continuously in the background of your life. Over time, you've become so accustomed to this constant broadcast that you've forgotten a crucial truth. You are not programming. You are the awareness in which all of this mental content appears. Our language reinforces this confusion between thoughts and identity. When anxiety arises, we say, "I am anxious," rather than, "I notice anxious thoughts appearing." This subtle distinction has enormous implications. By automatically identifying with every thought that arises, you give away your power to choose how you respond to life's challenges. Yet you already have direct experience of existing beyond thought. Think about moments when you've been fully absorbed in an activity, perhaps playing sports, creating art, or responding to an emergency. In these instances, thought naturally falls away, and you experience life directly, without the constant commentary of the mind. These moments reveal your natural state, clear, present, and undistorted by mental noise. The key to accessing this clarity more consistently lies not in trying to control or eliminate thoughts, but in recognizing their true nature. Thoughts arise spontaneously in consciousness, like clouds appearing in the sky. Just as clouds are not the sky itself, thoughts are not you. They are temporary appearances in the space of your awareness. To begin experiencing this distinction directly, start noticing the constant flow of thoughts without trying to change them. When a thought arises, simply note its presence. Planning thought, worrying thought, remembering thought. This simple act of labeling creates a subtle but crucial space between you, the observer, and the thought being observed. This recognition that you are not your thoughts isn't merely a philosophical concept. It's the foundation for transforming your entire relationship with life. When you no longer automatically identify with every thought that arises, you reclaim the power to choose your response rather than being driven by mental reactions. Your thoughts remain valuable tools for navigating life, but they no longer define or control you. Like clouds in the sky, they can come and go while you remain as the unchanging awareness in which all thoughts, emotions, and experiences arise. This shift transforms your entire relationship with thinking. Suddenly, your mind becomes a powerful instrument rather than your master. You gain the ability to draw upon its incredible problem-solving capacity when needed, while remaining free from its tendency to create unnecessary drama and suffering. Just as the sky isn't stained by storm clouds passing through it, your essential nature stays clear and untouched by the mental weather patterns moving across your awareness. Chapter 2. The Reaction Trap. Your phone buzzes with a message. Before you even read it, your body tenses. The message reveals your important presentation has been moved up by 2 days. In a fraction of a second, thoughts cascade through your mind. I'm not ready. This is impossible. They're setting me up to fail. Your heart races, palms sweat, and stomach churns. Within moments, you're firing off an angry email declining the change or making excuses to back out entirely. This lightning-fast sequence from trigger to reaction happens countless times throughout your day. A coworker's tone triggers thoughts of disrespect, leading to defensive responses. A child's resistance sparks thoughts of defiance, resulting in harsh words. These reaction patterns feel automatic and unavoidable because they operate at speeds faster than conscious awareness typically catches. Understanding this mechanism requires exploring how your brain processes information. When an event occurs, your mind instantly generates interpretive thoughts. These thoughts aren't neutral observers. They're rapid-fire judgments based on past experiences and ingrained beliefs. The moment these interpretive thoughts arise, they trigger corresponding emotional responses in your body through the release of stress hormones and neurotransmitters. This thought-emotion fusion happens so quickly that it creates the illusion that external events directly cause your emotional reactions. However, it's crucial to understand that your emotions respond to your thoughts about events, not the events themselves. This explains why different people can have vastly different emotional reactions to the same situation. Their interpretive thoughts differ. Your brain operates like a sophisticated but overzealous security system. Certain thoughts act as tripwires, automatically triggering emotional alarms that demand immediate action. This system doesn't wait for your conscious mind to evaluate whether the threat is real. It operates on the principle that false alarms are safer than missed threats. While this mechanism served our ancestors well when physical dangers were common, it now often creates unnecessary distress in situations that pose no actual threat. These reactive patterns become self-reinforcing through repetition. Each time you react to a thought-triggered emotion, you strengthen the neural pathways connecting that trigger to that reaction. These deepening reaction grooves make the same sequence more likely in future similar situations. This explains why you might find yourself having the same argument with your partner despite repeatedly resolving to respond differently, or why certain work situations consistently trigger the same stress response despite your best intentions. The power of these reaction patterns lies in their invisibility. Because the sequence from thought to reaction happens so quickly, most people never see the intermediate steps. This creates the feeling of being at the mercy of external triggers and emotional responses. However, understanding that thoughts drive this process reveals a crucial truth. Your reactions aren't inevitable responses to reality, but automated responses to thought-created interpretations. This understanding doesn't immediately change these patterns. Trying to stop reactions through willpower alone usually fails because the emotional response is already in motion before conscious awareness kicks in. However, recognizing how thoughts hijack your freedom creates the foundation for a different relationship with this mechanism. When you understand that your reactions flow from thoughts rather than directly from events, you gain a vital perspective that begins to weaken the automatic nature of these patterns. The first step in transforming this dynamic is becoming aware of your personal reaction patterns. Start noticing the specific thoughts that consistently trigger emotional reactions in your life. What interpretive thoughts arise when someone questions your judgment? What thoughts precede feelings of overwhelm or inadequacy? What mental commentary accompanies anger or withdrawal in relationships? This self-observation isn't about changing these patterns yet. It's about making visible what has been invisible. As you develop this awareness, you'll likely notice that relatively few thoughts are responsible for many of your strongest reactions. These core trigger thoughts often revolve around themes of safety, worth, control, or acceptance. Recognizing these patterns doesn't mean they're wrong or that you should immediately try to change them. Rather, this awareness creates space for a profound realization. Your reactions aren't happening to you. They're happening through you, driven by thoughts that can gradually become visible to your awareness. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Control. Take a moment right now. For the next 30 seconds, make absolutely certain you do not think about a purple elephant. Whatever you do, do not picture its wrinkled skin, long trunk, or vibrant violet color. Push away any thoughts of this purple elephant swaying or trumpeting or doing anything at all. What happened? The harder you tried to block out thoughts of the purple elephant, the more vivid and persistent those thoughts became. This isn't a failure of willpower or discipline on your part. It's a demonstration of a fundamental principle of how your mind works. Modern psychology has revealed this phenomenon through extensive research into what's called the ironic process theory, or mental irony effect. When you actively try to suppress a thought, your brain must maintain constant vigilance for that thought to catch and eliminate it. This vigilance keeps the unwanted thought perpetually activated in your neural networks, creating the exact opposite of what you intended. Think of it like trying to hold a beach ball underwater in a pool. The harder you push down, the more force builds up beneath. The moment your attention wavers, which it inevitably must, the ball explodes to the surface with even greater intensity than if you'd never tried to submerge it. Each attempt at suppression only adds to the potential energy of the rebound. You've likely experienced this pattern countless times. Perhaps you've tried to stop worrying about an upcoming event, only to find the concerns growing stronger, or attempted to suppress a craving, only to become more consumed by it, or work to push away painful memories or emotions, only to have them resurface with renewed power. This isn't because you're doing it wrong. It's because thought suppression itself is a fundamentally flawed strategy. This is why common advice to just stop worrying or think positive often backfires spectacularly. When you try to directly control your thoughts, you activate two mental processes simultaneously: the thought itself and the monitoring system that checks whether you're still thinking it. It's like telling yourself, "Don't look down," while walking on a height. The instruction contains the very thing it's trying to prevent. You might be wondering, if trying to control unwanted thoughts makes them stronger, are we simply helpless against them? Absolutely not. The solution lies in understanding a crucial distinction. Accepting the presence of thoughts does not mean believing them or acting on them. Thoughts themselves are neither good nor bad. They're simply mental events that arise and pass away based on countless factors beyond our conscious control. The suffering comes not from having certain thoughts, but from our desperate attempts to control them. When we stop fighting against unwanted thoughts and instead allow them to be present without engagement or resistance, something remarkable happens. They begin to lose their grip on us. Consider the difference between being in a tug-of-war with your thoughts versus simply observing them pass by like clouds in the sky. In the first scenario, every pull against the thought is matched by an equal pullback, keeping you locked in struggle. In the second, thoughts may still arise, but without resistance, they naturally dissipate on their own. This principle reveals a profound truth. Genuine freedom from troublesome thoughts comes not through force. but through transforming our relationship with them. Rather than trying to control what thoughts appear, we can learn to control how we relate to whatever thoughts arise. The key lies in what we might call thought welcoming, acknowledging each thought's presence without trying to change, eliminate, or even improve it. This isn't passive resignation, but active acceptance that paradoxically creates space for natural change. When we stop treating certain thoughts as enemies to be vanquished, they often lose the very resistance that was keeping them stuck in place. Think of thoughts like waves in an ocean. You can exhaust yourself trying to stop the waves, or you can learn to surf them. The waves themselves don't change, but your relationship to them transforms completely. The process begins with simply noticing and acknowledging thoughts as they arise, without judgment or resistance. If a worried thought appears, rather than immediately trying to push it away or replace it with a positive thought, you might mentally note, there's a worry thought, and allow it to be present while continuing with your activities. This radically different approach to unwanted thoughts may seem counterintuitive at first. Your mind has likely been conditioned to view certain thoughts as threats that must be eliminated. But consider this. What if the real threat isn't the thoughts themselves, but your exhausting battle against them? Chapter 4. The Observer Effect. In the fascinating world of quantum physics, a remarkable phenomenon occurs. The mere act of observing particles fundamentally changes their behavior. This isn't just an exotic principle confined to laboratories. It reflects a profound truth about the nature of your own mind. Just as particles shift under observation, your thoughts transform when met with conscious awareness. Most people move through life completely identified with their thoughts, like someone so absorbed in a movie they've forgotten they're sitting in a theater. Every thought that arises immediately becomes "I think" or "I am," creating an automatic fusion between self and mental content. This fusion happens so quickly and habitually that there seems to be no separation between you and your thoughts. They appear to be one and the same. But consider the vast sky above you. Clouds come and go, taking endless shapes and forms, creating storms or bringing gentle rain. Yet the sky itself remains unchanged, unaffected by these temporary patterns moving through it. Your consciousness operates in the same way. It is the boundless space in which thoughts appear and disappear, yet remains fundamentally untouched by their content. This capacity for metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking process, represents a quantum leap in human evolution. While other animals are completely identified with their experiences, you possess the remarkable ability to step back and witness your own mental processes. This isn't just philosophical theory. Neuroscience has mapped distinct brain networks that activate when engaged in self-reflection versus being lost in thought. When you begin to cultivate this witness perspective, something extraordinary happens. Thoughts that once seemed absolutely true and demanding of immediate reaction begin to lose their compelling power. Like watching a scary movie with the lights on, the ability to see thoughts as thoughts rather than reality itself naturally diminishes their control over your emotions and behaviors. Consider how a thought like "I'm not good enough" operates differently when witnessed versus believed. When automatically accepted, this thought triggers a cascade of emotional and physiological responses: tension, anxiety, withdrawal. But when observed with awareness, its nature as a temporary mental construct becomes clear. You begin to recognize that "I'm not good enough" is not a fact about reality, but a thought appearing in consciousness, like a cloud passing through the sky. This shift from fusion to observation creates the essential foundation for freedom from reactive patterns. When thoughts are witnessed rather than immediately believed and acted upon, the space for conscious response naturally emerges. This isn't about forcing change or controlling thoughts. It's about recognizing the awareness within which thoughts appear. The power of witnessed thoughts extends beyond individual moments of reactivity. As you strengthen this capacity for mindful observation, you begin to recognize recurring thought patterns that have unconsciously driven behavior for years. Thoughts that once seemed like absolute truth reveal themselves as habitual mental constructions, ones you can choose to engage with or simply let pass. Some may object that merely watching thoughts seems too passive, that it won't lead to real change. But this misunderstands the profound nature of conscious observation. When you truly witness thoughts without getting caught in their content, they begin to lose their automatic power to control your actions. This creates the essential space between stimulus and response where real choice becomes possible. This capacity for witnessed thought isn't something to achieve or develop. It's your natural state of being that has been obscured by habitual thought identification. Just as the sky is always present behind the clouds, your awareness remains constant regardless of mental activity. The practice involves recognizing what's already there rather than creating something new. The psychological implications of this understanding run deep. Research in mindfulness and contemplative neuroscience has demonstrated how strengthening metacognitive awareness leads to reduced stress, improved emotional regulation, and enhanced decision-making capacity. When thoughts are witnessed rather than immediately believed, their grip on behavior naturally loosens. Modern psychology has termed this capacity cognitive diffusion, the ability to see thoughts as mental events rather than literal truths. This shift from being thoughts to having thoughts represents a fundamental transformation in human consciousness, one that creates the foundation for all lasting change. Chapter 5. The Response Gap. Picture two identical moments. Your colleague sends a critical email questioning your judgment on an important project. In the first scenario, heat rises to your face as thoughts race through your mind. How dare they? They're trying to undermine me. Without pause, you fire back a defensive response, escalating the situation and damaging the working relationship. In the second scenario, those same thoughts and sensations arise, but something different happens. You notice the surge of emotion, recognize the reactive thoughts, and allow a small gap to open. In that space, you see beyond the initial interpretation to recognize your colleague's valid concerns. Your response, though direct, addresses the actual issues rather than reacting to imagined threats. Between every trigger and your response lies a space, often microscopically small but containing infinite potential. This space exists not just in dramatic confrontations but in every moment of your day. It's present when your child tests your patience, when traffic threatens to derail your schedule, when anxiety pushes you toward hasty decisions. This gap, however brief, holds the key to transforming your entire relationship with life's challenges. The neuroscience of this response gap reveals why it often feels non-existent. When triggered, your brain activates an emergency response system that evolved for immediate survival reactions. This system creates a neural shortcut, bypassing the prefrontal cortex where thoughtful responses originate. The process happens with such speed that reaction and trigger seem inseparable, like lightning and thunder that appear simultaneously when you're at the storm center. Think of this gap as a doorway that exists in every challenging moment. When emotions run high, this doorway becomes narrow and easily missed. Yet it never disappears completely. Just as your eyes can adjust to see in dim light, Your awareness can develop to perceive increasingly subtle spaces between stimulus and response. Decades of reactivity create deep neural pathways. Like water flowing down a mountainside, your responses naturally follow these established routes. This explains why, even when you intellectually know better, you find yourself repeating reactive patterns that leave you feeling regretful and powerless. The pathways feel inevitable because they've become your brain's default navigation system. The distinction between reaction and response illuminates the transformative potential of this gap. Reactions emerge automatically from thought-created interpretations, stories about what situations mean about you, others, or life itself. These interpretations trigger emotions that demand immediate action. Responses, in contrast, arise from direct perception of the current situation, uninhibited by the distorting lens of reactive thoughts. You might question whether finding this gap is practical in urgent situations where split-second decisions matter. Yet even a fraction of a second can create sufficient space to shift from reactivity to responsiveness. This isn't about adding time-consuming analysis to every interaction, but developing the capacity to recognize choice where before there seemed only compulsion. The key lies in understanding that this space exists by default. It doesn't need to be created, but merely recognized. Every stimulus travels through your nervous system, creating a natural delay between event and response. While this delay may be milliseconds, becoming aware of it opens the door to profound transformation. This isn't about eliminating thoughts or suppressing emotions. Those arise naturally and serve important functions. The shift occurs in recognizing them as optional interpretations rather than compelling truths that demand immediate action. Your thoughts about a situation are not the situation itself. They are commentary added by your mind, often recycling past patterns rather than responding to present reality. The neural pathways of responsiveness strengthen through practice, just as the paths of reactivity develop through repetition. Each time you notice the gap, even after reacting, you reinforce the awareness that makes future recognition more likely. This creates an upward spiral where small successes build upon themselves, gradually expanding your capacity to access this space of freedom. Think of your mind like a vast sky, where thoughts and emotions are weather patterns moving through. The response gap is your recognition of the sky itself, the spacious awareness that remains constant regardless of mental weather conditions. This space exists not despite challenging emotions but within them, like the eye of a storm, where stillness persists even as winds rage at the periphery. Chapter 6: The Mind's False Alarms. You're walking along a dimly lit path when your heart suddenly races, muscles tense, and adrenaline surges. A snake lies coiled before you. Every survival system activates instantly, yet as you cautiously edge closer, the shape reveals itself as merely a twisted rope. In that moment of recognition, all fear instantly dissolves. The biochemical cascade halts. What appeared as mortal danger just seconds ago now holds no threat whatsoever. This fundamental mechanism plays out countless times in your daily life, though usually more subtly. Your mind constantly interprets situations, generating thoughts that feel absolutely true and demanding immediate response. When someone doesn't reply to your message, your mind declares they're ignoring me. When facing a challenging task, it warns, you'll never figure this out. During a moment of uncertainty, it proclaims everything is falling apart. These interpretations trigger the same physiological responses as that rope snake on the path. Your body doesn't distinguish between actual threats and thought-created ones. Each worried thought about the future, Each assumed slight, each catastrophic prediction sets off identical biochemical cascades. Just as your body prepares to flee from an imaginary snake, it continuously reacts to imaginary disasters constructed by your mind. The mind's tendency toward negative interpretation exists for good reason. Throughout human evolution, assuming the worst often provided survival advantage. Better to mistake a rope for a snake than a snake for a rope. This protective mechanism served its purpose when physical threats were constant. But in today's world, this same system misinterprets everyday situations as emergencies, creating unnecessary states of emergency that exhaust you without providing genuine protection. Your thoughts operate like an oversensitive home security system, blaring alerts at every shadow and movement. The system's intention is protection, but its hypersensitivity creates a state of constant false alarms that disrupts your peace and clouds your judgment. Just as you wouldn't want to live with an alarm that screams danger at every passing cat, you needn't remain captive to a mind that interprets every uncertainty as catastrophe. Specific thought patterns reliably generate these false alarms. Catastrophizing transforms minor setbacks into disasters. A delayed project becomes career suicide. Mind reading assumes you know others' thoughts. A colleague's brief response means they're angry with you. Black and white thinking eliminates nuance. Anything less than perfect equals complete failure. Emotional reasoning treats feelings as facts. If you feel inadequate, you must be inadequate. These distortions feel completely real when they arise. Their very intensity seems to prove their truth. Yet just as your body's fear response to the rope snake felt utterly convincing until recognition dawned, these thought-created emergencies dissolve when seen clearly. The intensity of a thought says nothing about its accuracy. In fact, the mind's certainty often inversely correlates with its reliability. The more absolutely convinced you are of a thought's truth, the more essential it becomes to examine it. This examination doesn't require complex analysis. Just as the rope revealed itself simply by looking more closely, thought distortions lose their power through basic questioning. When your mind declares, "This will be a complete disaster," asking, "Do I know this with absolute certainty?" creates space for more accurate perception. When it insists they think I'm incompetent, wondering, "Can I actually read their thoughts?" breaks the spell of assumed knowledge. The goal isn't to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. That approach keeps you trapped in the realm of interpretation rather than reality. Instead, by recognizing distortion patterns and questioning their authority, you naturally align with what's actually happening rather than what your mind imagines might happen. This creates the foundation for responses based on clear perception rather than anxious projection. This recognition practice requires neither force nor complex techniques. Just as you didn't need to argue with your fear response once you clearly saw the rope, you don't need to fight with distorted thoughts. Seeing them clearly is enough. Their power lies in being mistaken for reality. Once recognized as interpretations rather than facts, they naturally lose their grip, allowing you to respond to life as it is, rather than as your mind imagines it to be. Chapter 7. The Present Moment Anchor. Anxiety and regret share a fascinating common trait. They can only exist when your mind ventures away from the present moment. Try experiencing anxiety while fully immersed in your immediate sensory experience. Notice how impossible it becomes. Worry requires mental projection into an imagined future. Similarly, regret demands mental time travel into the past. In the pure experience of now, these mental states simply cannot survive. Yet most of your life unfolds in what we might call thought time, a parallel mental reality constructed of memories, projections, and narratives that overlay the simple truth of what's actually happening. Your mind constantly pulls you from the only moment where genuine choice exists, right now, into elaborate stories about what happened yesterday or what might occur tomorrow. This mental time travel serves important functions. The capacity to learn from the past and plan for the future represents a remarkable evolutionary achievement. But like many adaptive traits, it's become excessive in modern life. Rather than using past and future as occasional tools, most people live primarily in thought-created time, only briefly touching the present moment before being swept away again by the mind's temporal currents. Consider how often you're physically present in one moment while mentally inhabiting another entirely. Your body sits in an important meeting, but your mind rehearses future conversations or replays past mistakes. You stand in your kitchen preparing dinner while your thoughts race ahead to tomorrow's challenges, or drift back to this morning's frustrations. In these moments, you're living in thought time rather than real time. This constant mental time travel creates a peculiar form of suffering. You miss the richness of actual experience while battling imagined scenarios that exist only in thought. The mind constructs elaborate problems from future possibilities that may never materialize, or tortures itself with past events that cannot be changed. Meanwhile, the present moment, the only point from which genuine response and choice can emerge, remains largely unexplored. The present moment serves as solid ground in this ocean of thought-created time. Each return to direct sensory experience acts like grabbing a life-preserving anchor during a mental storm. When caught in anxious future projections or past regrets, simply noticing your breath, feeling your feet on the floor, or hearing the sounds around you instantly reconnects you with the concrete reality of now. This might seem impractical in a world that demands planning and reflection, but there's a crucial distinction between using thoughts about time as tools versus being unconsciously dominated by them. Effective planning happens in the present moment. You can think about the future while remaining grounded in current reality. This differs dramatically from being lost in thought-created time, where the mind's projections feel more real than actual experience. The key lies in recognizing thought time as a mental construct rather than objective reality. Your memories of the past are not the past itself, they're present moment thoughts about what happened. Your anticipations of the future are not the future itself. They're present moment constructions about what might occur. The only thing that ever actually exists is this moment, continuously unfolding. Living in thought time creates a particularly insidious form of bondage. You become reactive to mental constructions rather than responsive to what's actually happening. When caught in future-oriented anxiety, you react to imagined scenarios rather than addressing what's needed now. When lost in past-focused regret, you miss opportunities for genuine change available in the present moment. The cultural momentum pulls strongly toward thought time. Society prizes planning, reflection, and future orientation. Yet all genuine change, choice, and response can only emerge from presence in the actual moment. You cannot transform your relationship with thoughts while lost in thought-created time. You cannot access the response gap while mentally dwelling in the past or future. The present moment offers a natural doorway out of thought time through direct sensory awareness. Your senses only operate now. You cannot smell tomorrow's flowers or hear yesterday's music. When overwhelmed by mental time travel, simply shifting attention to immediate sensory experience instantly returns you to the concrete reality of the present. This return to presence need not involve complex practices or formal meditation. Brief moments of sensory awareness scattered throughout your day create vital breaks in the stream of thought time. Notice the sensation of water on your hands while washing dishes. Feel the weight of your body while waiting in line. Listen to the texture of sounds during your commute. Each conscious contact with immediate experience weakens thought time's grip on your attention. Chapter 8. The Body Compass. Your body knows things your thoughts don't. This truth becomes evident when you reflect on those moments where you had an unmistakable gut feeling that proved correct, despite your logical mind arguing otherwise. Perhaps you sensed something wasn't right in a seemingly perfect situation, or you felt inexplicably drawn toward a choice that appeared irrational, yet ultimately proved wise. These experiences point to a profound reality. Wisdom flows through channels beyond verbal thought. Modern neuroscience has revealed that your body processes information through an intricate network of neurons extending far beyond your brain. The enteric nervous system, often called your second brain, contains over 100 million neurons in your gut alone. This complex system continuously processes information about your environment and experiences, reaching sophisticated conclusions without needing to translate them into verbal thoughts. Think of thoughts as similar to following map directions, explicit, detailed, but limited by what's already been charted and documented. Your body's wisdom, in contrast, functions more like a compass, providing direct orientation without needing to verbalize the route. This embodied knowing often manifests as subtle physical sensations: a tightening in your stomach, an opening in your chest, a sense of heaviness or lightness that communicate important information about situations or choices. Yet modern life has trained you to override these bodily signals in favor of mental analysis. From early education onward, you've been conditioned to privilege thinking over feeling, to trust spreadsheets over sensations, to value verbal reasoning above physical knowledge. This conditioning creates a profound disconnection from your body's natural wisdom, leaving you reliant on thought alone to navigate life's complexities. The barrier to accessing embodied wisdom isn't a lack of information. Your body is constantly processing and responding to countless subtle cues, but rather the habit of dismissing or overriding these signals in favor of mental analysis. Your logical mind, while invaluable for certain tasks, often drowns out the quieter voice of bodily intelligence with its constant commentary and analysis. A critical distinction exists between anxiety-driven body sensations and genuine intuitive signals. Anxiety manifests as reactive physical responses to thought-created fears, racing heart, shallow breathing, muscle tension. These sensations arise from your mind's projections rather than direct perception of reality. Intuitive signals, by contrast, tend to be subtler and more stable. A quiet knowing in your gut, a sense of rightness or wrongness that persists beneath mental chatter. The integration of thought and embodied wisdom creates far more effective responses than either system alone. Your thinking mind excels at analyzing details, weighing options, and creating plans. Your body's intelligence provides crucial context, the felt sense of whether those plans align with deeper knowing, whether those logical conclusions resonate with embodied truth. Scientific research increasingly validates this ancient understanding. Studies in embodied cognition demonstrate how your physical state influences your perceptions, decisions, and responses in ways that bypass conscious thought. Your body literally shapes your understanding of reality, contributing essential information that thoughts alone cannot access. The key to accessing this embodied wisdom lies not in silencing thoughts, but in expanding your attention to include physical sensations. This means developing what researchers call interoception, the ability to sense and interpret your body's internal signals. Like any skill, this capacity strengthens with practice and conscious attention. The process begins with simply noticing the physical sensations that accompany different situations and choices. Rather than immediately jumping to mental analysis, pause to sense what your body communicates. Pay particular attention to sensations in your heart and gut regions, where dense neural networks process complex information about your environment and experiences. When facing decisions or challenging situations, consciously consult both your thoughts and your body's signals. Notice whether your logical conclusions create tension or ease in your body. Pay attention to whether your gut sends subtle signals of agreement or warning, regardless of how reasonable something appears on paper. This integration of thought and embodied wisdom doesn't require abandoning rational analysis. Instead, it creates a more complete understanding by incorporating multiple channels of intelligence. Your thoughts provide the what and how, while your body offers crucial insight into the yes or no, the deep knowing that transcends logical reasoning. Chapter 9. The Values Lighthouse. When thoughts and emotions create internal turbulence, you need something more reliable than fleeting mental states to guide your choices. Consider two responses to receiving unexpected criticism at work. The first involves being swept away by a storm of defensive thoughts and reactive emotions, leading to impulsive decisions that damage professional relationships. The second demonstrates how anchoring to core values, like growth, integrity, or understanding, allows for thoughtful responses aligned with long-term aspirations rather than immediate emotional impulses. Your values serve as an internal navigation system that remains constant even when your mental weather turns chaotic. While thoughts shift like wind patterns and emotions surge like waves, values provide steady direction, not by dictating exact steps, but by illuminating the path that aligns with your deepest principles. Modern neuroscience reveals how the brain's threat detection systems can hijack attention toward immediate concerns, overriding our connection to larger values. This evolutionary feature served our ancestors well when survival demanded quick reactions. But in today's complex world, this same mechanism often derails us from what matters most. Your brain doesn't distinguish between physical threats and social challenges. Criticism, rejection, or uncertainty trigger the same defensive reactions that once protected us from predators. Values operate on a different level than thoughts or goals. While goals represent specific destinations you can reach and check off, like completing a project or reaching a sales target, values represent chosen life directions that guide ongoing behavior. Excellence, courage, or compassion aren't destinations you arrive at, but compass points that continuously inform your choices. This distinction proves crucial during challenging moments. When thoughts create stories about worst-case scenarios or emotions demand immediate reaction, values provide a broader perspective that transcends momentary discomfort. They answer the essential question: in this situation, what kind of person do I want to be? The challenge lies not in knowing your values intellectually, but in maintaining their influence when triggering situations activate reactive patterns. Your mind may generate compelling reasons to abandon valued directions in favor of short-term emotional relief. Understanding this pattern helps explain why people often act against their own stated values during stressful moments. Values clarification involves more than creating a list of admirable qualities. It requires identifying specific behavioral anchors that translate abstract principles into concrete choices. When respect moves from concept to specific behaviors, like listening fully before responding or acknowledging others' perspectives even during disagreement, it becomes a practical decision-making tool. This framework simplifies complex choices by providing clear criteria. Does this response align with my values? Rather than getting lost in endless analysis of potential outcomes or emotional reactions, values offer stable reference points for navigation. They don't eliminate difficulty, but provide direction through it. Your values compass remains accurate even when thoughts create storms of doubt or emotions cloud your judgment. Unlike goals that can be achieved or failed, values provide ongoing direction regardless of results. You can always act with integrity, show compassion, or pursue growth, regardless of external circumstances or internal states. This orientation transforms how you relate to challenging situations. Instead of viewing difficulties as obstacles to overcome or threats to avoid, they become opportunities to embody your chosen values. Each challenge offers a chance to demonstrate what matters most to you through your responses rather than your reactions. When thoughts suggest catastrophic outcomes or emotions demand immediate action, values remind you of the larger context of your choices. They create space between impulse and action, not by suppressing thoughts or controlling emotions, but by offering an alternative foundation for decision-making. Values provide stability precisely because they transcend both positive and negative experiences. While goals depend on specific outcomes, values remain relevant regardless of results. You can act with courage whether you succeed or fail. Demonstrate kindness whether others reciprocate or not. Pursue excellence regardless of external recognition. This perspective shifts the fundamental question from, "What should I do?" to, "Who do I want to be at this moment?" It moves beyond the limitations of thought-based problem solving to connect with deeper sources of wisdom and direction. When you ground yourself in values rather than reactions, you tap into an inner compass that transcends the narrow confines of emotional impulses. Your choices become expressions of your authentic self rather than products of circumstance, allowing you to act with intention even when situations feel overwhelming or unclear. This shift transforms decision-making from a stressful burden into an opportunity to embody what matters most to you. Chapter 10. The Narrative Rewrite. You possess an extraordinary power that shapes every aspect of your experience, the ability to interpret and frame the events of your life. This power operates so automatically that you likely don't notice its profound influence on your emotions, behaviors, and possibilities. Your brain constantly weaves experiences into narratives, creating an ongoing story that explains who you are and what your life means. This isn't optional. It's how your mind makes sense of reality. The challenge lies not in whether you create stories, but in recognizing that you're the author rather than merely a character bound by plots written from limited perspectives. When faced with a professional setback, your mind immediately generates a narrative to explain it. This interpretation then shapes everything that follows: your emotional response, your actions, and what you believe is possible going forward. The facts themselves remain unchanged, but their meaning transforms completely based on the story you tell about them. The brain's narrative-making process developed as a survival mechanism, helping our ancestors make quick sense of their environment and learn from experience. Today, this same mechanism continues operating, but often through perspectives shaped by past wounds, cultural conditioning, and protective patterns that may no longer serve you. Modern neuroscience reveals how these narratives become self-reinforcing through neural pathways that strengthen with repetition. Each time you interpret events through a familiar story lens, whether of victimhood, inadequacy, or limitation, you deepen those neural grooves, making that interpretation increasingly automatic and real feeling. Understanding this process illuminates why simply trying to think positive often fails. Your current narratives aren't just thoughts, they're embedded interpretive frameworks that filter your entire experience. They feel like objective reality because they shape what you notice, what you believe is possible, and how you make sense of everything that happens. This realization can feel both liberating and threatening. Recognizing that your interpretations are constructed rather than discovered means you have more freedom than you realized. Yet it also means questioning stories that, however limiting, have provided a sense of coherence and predictability. The key distinction lies in separating events themselves from the meaning you assign them. A job loss is a concrete event, but whether it represents crushing failure or an opportunity for reinvention depends entirely on the narrative framework you apply. Your stories aren't fabrications. They're interpretive lenses that highlight certain aspects of reality while obscuring others. Transforming limiting narratives doesn't mean denying difficult realities or painful experiences. Instead, it means recognizing that multiple valid interpretations exist for any situation. Just as a skilled author can tell the same basic story as either tragedy or triumph, you can reframe your experiences while honoring their reality. This capacity for reframing isn't about positive thinking. It's about expanded thinking. It's recognizing that your current interpretations, however compelling they feel, represent just one possible narrative among many. Other perspectives might be equally true, while opening up different possibilities for response and growth. Your interpretive power becomes particularly crucial during challenges. While you can't always control events, you retain authorship over their meaning in your life story. This doesn't mean pretending difficulties don't exist. It means choosing frameworks that empower rather than diminish you. The process begins with awareness, noticing the stories you're currently telling and how they shape your experience. Pay attention to your automatic interpretations, especially during difficulties. What meaning do you instantly assign? What alternative perspectives might be equally valid? This expanded awareness naturally creates space between events and their interpretation, the same space where your power as author resides. From this space, you can consciously choose narratives aligned with your values and aspirations while still acknowledging life's complexities. Remember, you're not rewriting history, but consciously choosing how to interpret and carry forward your experiences. This isn't about creating fantasy, but about recognizing the profound impact of narrative framing on your lived experience. Your life story continues unfolding in each moment. The question is not whether you'll interpret these moments. You will, automatically, but whether you'll do so consciously, recognizing your role as author rather than remaining trapped in limiting narratives that masquerade as unchangeable reality. This creative power exists within you already, waiting to be accessed. Your interpretations shape not just your memories, but your entire trajectory. The actions you take, the opportunities you notice, the connections you forge. When you embrace your role as author, seemingly fixed stories transform into launching points for growth, and obstacles become invitations to write new chapters aligned with your deepest truth. Chapter 11: The Emotional Thermostat. Your emotions, in their natural state, operate like waves, rising, peaking, and dissipating within minutes when left uninterrupted. This biological reality contradicts everything you've likely experienced with difficult emotions that seem to persist for hours or days. The key distinction lies not in the emotion itself, but in what happens after that initial wave rises. The brain's threat detection system initiates an emotional response in milliseconds, preparing your body for action before conscious awareness even registers the trigger. This lightning-fast reaction served our ancestors well, mobilizing resources for immediate survival challenges. However, the human mind has evolved an additional capacity that both helps and hinders this system, the ability to think about our emotions. When an emotion arises, thoughts immediately begin interpreting, analyzing, and often judging the experience. These thoughts then trigger secondary emotional responses, creating a self-perpetuating cycle that maintains the emotional state long after the original trigger has passed. Your mind essentially functions as an emotional thermostat, but one that often malfunctions by continuously responding to its own output, rather than the actual temperature of the room. Consider anxiety. The initial physiological response to a perceived threat naturally dissipates within minutes when the threat passes. However, thoughts about the anxiety, "This feeling is unbearable. What if it never stops? I'm losing control," generates additional anxiety, which prompts more anxious thoughts, establishing a cycle that can persist indefinitely. The body doesn't distinguish between real threats and thought-created ones. Each worried thought triggers the same physiological response as an actual danger, releasing stress hormones that maintain the state of arousal. This creates what neuroscience calls emotional inflammation, a heightened state of reactivity where each thought trigger builds upon the previous one, making the system increasingly sensitive to activation. This pattern extends beyond anxiety to all emotional states. Anger persists because thoughts about being wronged regenerate the initial fury. Sadness deepens as thoughts elaborate on themes of loss or inadequacy. Even positive emotions like excitement can become problematic when thoughts create pressure to maintain the state, turning natural joy into anxious grasping. The modern human mind, with its remarkable capacity for abstract thought, often functions like a skilled attorney building cases to support emotional states. It gathers evidence from memory, projects future scenarios, and constructs elaborate narratives that justify and intensify the original feeling. What begins as a simple emotion becomes wrapped in layers of mental commentary that obscure the basic nature of the experience. Understanding this mechanism reveals why common emotional regulation strategies often backfire. Trying to think your way out of an emotion typically adds fuel to the cycle. Analyzing why you feel bad tends to generate more bad feelings. Attempting to suppress or control emotions through thought creates internal conflict that amplifies the very states you're trying to manage. The key to working with emotions lies not in controlling them, but in understanding their natural cycles. Emotions, like all physiological processes, move through predictable phases when allowed to complete their course. Just as hunger naturally rises and falls without requiring mental intervention, emotions have their own organic rhythm of emergence and resolution. This insight transforms how we relate to emotional experiences. Rather than treating emotions as problems to solve or states to control, we can recognize them as temporary physiological events that resolve naturally when not perpetuated by thought patterns. This doesn't mean becoming passive or disconnected. Instead, it means developing the capacity to experience emotions directly while recognizing the thought patterns that artificially extend them. The practice of emotional surfing develops this capacity. It involves maintaining aware presence with emotional sensations while noticing how thoughts attempt to grab attention and extend the cycle. Like learning to surf ocean waves, the key is finding the balance between being with the motion while not getting pulled under by it. Establishing this new relationship with emotions requires understanding that discomfort is not damage. The urge to immediately resolve emotional discomfort through thinking often reflects a misguided belief that feelings themselves are harmful. In reality, it's the persistent cycles of thought-generated secondary emotions that create genuine wear and tear on the system. The mind's tendency to function as an overactive emotional thermostat comes from deep conditioning. You've likely spent years trying to think your way through emotional challenges, analyzing feelings in an attempt to resolve them. While insight and understanding have their place, they become problematic when deployed as ways to avoid directly experiencing emotions as they arise and pass. Chapter 12. The Choice Point. Between every trigger and your reaction exists a choice point, a momentary space where multiple possibilities exist before one becomes reality. Though often imperceptible, this intersection of potential responses remains present, whether you notice it or not. The challenge isn't creating this choice point, as it already exists, but developing the awareness to recognize and utilize it. When thoughts control behavior, they create an illusion of inevitability, making it seem as though there's only one possible response to any given situation. This perceived lack of options stems from how the brain processes familiar triggers. Through repetition, neural pathways become increasingly efficient at producing specific responses, much like water naturally flowing through the deepest channel in a riverbed. The brain's efficiency in following these well-worn paths serves an evolutionary purpose. By automating responses to common situations, it conserves mental energy and allows for rapid action. However, this same efficiency can trap you in reactive patterns that don't serve your highest good. Consider how neural pathways operate in your brain. Each time you react in a particular way to a trigger, you strengthen the connection between that stimulus and response. Over time, this creates what neuroscientists call preferential pathways, neural circuits that activate automatically before alternative possibilities even register in consciousness. These pathways don't just influence behavior, they actually shape perception itself. When caught in reactive patterns, your brain literally filters incoming information to confirm the necessity of your habitual response. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where you see what you expect to see, react how you've always reacted, and strengthen the very pathways that limit your options. Breaking free from this cycle requires understanding that your reactive patterns aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're the natural result of how your brain optimizes for efficiency. The path to greater response flexibility doesn't come through self-judgment or forceful control, but through expanding awareness of the options that already exist. Developing response flexibility involves a paradox. The more you try to force yourself to respond differently, the more you reinforce the idea that your reactive patterns are powerful opponents that must be overcome. True freedom comes not from battling your patterns, but from seeing through the illusion of their inevitability. Your brain possesses remarkable neuroplasticity, the ability to form new neural pathways throughout life. Each time you pause at a choice point and consider alternatives, you begin carving new channels in that neural landscape. Initially, these alternative pathways require more conscious effort, like walking through untamed wilderness instead of following a well-worn trail. But with consistent attention, these new paths become increasingly accessible, The key lies in shifting focus from controlling responses to expanding awareness of options. This subtle but crucial distinction changes everything. Instead of approaching triggers with the question, "How do I stop myself from reacting?" you learn to ask, "What other possibilities exist at this moment?" This shift reveals that response flexibility isn't about adding to your behavioral repertoire, but about removing the perceptual limitations that make only one response visible. As awareness expands, you naturally discover options that were always present, but hidden behind the veil of reactive thinking. The science of neuroplasticity confirms that even small interruptions in habitual patterns can initiate significant neural reorganization over time. Each moment, you pause to consider alternatives, regardless of whether you ultimately choose a different response, strengthens your brain's capacity to recognize choice points in future situations. This understanding transforms how you approach challenging situations. Rather than steeling yourself against triggers or trying to force different behaviors, you develop the capacity to hold multiple response possibilities in awareness. This expanded perspective naturally leads to more conscious choices aligned with your values rather than your conditioning. Your brain's plasticity ensures that this capacity grows stronger with attention and practice. Each time you recognize a choice point, whether you change your response or not, you reinforce the neural pathways that support greater response flexibility. This creates an upward spiral where increased awareness leads to more conscious choices, which in turn strengthen the capacity for awareness. The freedom this perspective offers isn't freedom from thoughts or triggers, but freedom to respond rather than react. It's the difference between being locked into a single channel and having access to the full spectrum of possible responses in any given moment. Chapter 13. The Communication Bridge. Think of your most recent difficult conversation. Perhaps it was with a family member, colleague, or partner. Notice how quickly your mind generated interpretations about their words, tone, and intentions, often before they finish speaking. This instantaneous meaning-making happens beneath conscious awareness, creating a filter through which all communication passes. When others speak, you're not just hearing their words. You're experiencing them through layers of thoughts about what they really mean, what they should say, and how their communication style measures against your expectations. These thought-created filters transform simple exchanges into complex emotional terrain where genuine connection becomes nearly impossible. Your brain processes social interactions through neural networks shaped by every significant conversation you've ever had. These patterns create instantaneous interpretations that feel like direct perception, but actually reflect your own conditioning more than present reality. This mechanism served an evolutionary purpose. Quickly categorizing others' intentions as friendly or hostile aided survival. However, in modern relationships, this rapid response system often creates more problems than it solves. Consider how your mind maintains ongoing commentary during conversations, anticipating responses before others finish speaking, rehearsing rebuttals while appearing to listen, and filtering everything through past experiences that may have nothing to do with the present moment. This internal narrative creates a gap between the actual person speaking and your thought-created version of them. The most profound shift in communication occurs when you recognize that most conversations happen between mental projections rather than actual people. You respond to your interpretation of what someone means, while they react to their interpretation of your words, creating parallel monologues rather than genuine dialogue. This pattern explains why the same conversations often repeat without resolution. You're not actually engaging with each other, but with thought-created versions that don't evolve or learn. When caught in reactive patterns, you perceive others through accumulated layers of past interactions, current triggers, and future fears. A simple comment that touches an old wound can instantly activate a cascade of thoughts that drowns out what's actually being said. The person before you disappears behind a mental image constructed from memories, assumptions, and emotional associations. True listening becomes impossible when thoughts dominate awareness during conversations. While appearing to pay attention, your mind races through judgment, analysis, and response preparation, missing the subtle cues, unstated needs, and opportunities for genuine connection that exist beneath the surface of words. The shift from reactive to responsive communication begins with recognizing these thought-created barriers to authentic connection. This doesn't require eliminating thoughts, an impossible and counterproductive goal, but developing the capacity to notice when mental commentary overshadows direct perception of the person before you. Presence in conversation means maintaining awareness of both content and connection, hearing the words while remaining attuned to the human being speaking them. This dual attention allows you to notice when thoughts pull you into reaction, providing the crucial pause where conscious response becomes possible. The foundation of responsive communication is the willingness to listen without immediately overlaying personal interpretations onto others' words. This creates space for genuine understanding to emerge, rather than merely confirming pre-existing thoughts about what someone means or intends. When you recognize that most relationship conflicts stem from reacting to thought-created versions of others rather than responding to who they actually are, a new possibility emerges. Each conversation becomes an opportunity to see beyond mental projections to the real person present, allowing authentic connection to replace reactive patterns. Similar to how a projector overlays images onto a blank screen, your thoughts create versions of others that may have little connection to reality. Responsive communication requires repeatedly recognizing these projections and choosing to engage with the actual person rather than your mental image of them. The quality of your relationships directly reflects your capacity to distinguish between others as they are and your thoughts about them. This recognition opens the door to genuine dialogue where both parties feel truly heard rather than merely handled through habitual reactions. Chapter 14: The Productivity Paradox. Modern culture perpetuates a dangerous myth that more thinking automatically leads to better outcomes. This assumption feels intuitively correct, yet research consistently shows the opposite. When subjects were monitored during complex tasks, those who engaged in extensive planning and analysis often performed worse than those who maintained a more balanced approach between thinking and action. This productivity paradox reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how the mind actually works. Your brain's executive function, the cognitive system responsible for planning, decision-making, and focused attention, operates like a battery with limited daily capacity. Every minute spent in excessive analysis depletes this essential resource, leaving less energy available for actual implementation. Consider what happens in your body when you're about to give a presentation. If you allow thoughts to dominate, imagining every possible scenario, rehearsing responses to potential questions, second-guessing your preparation, you create an internal environment of stress and exhaustion before you even begin. This thought-driven approach consumes the very mental and physical resources you need for effective performance. When the mind becomes overloaded with options, possibilities, and potential outcomes, it enters a state of analysis paralysis. This cognitive gridlock occurs because the prefrontal cortex can only process a limited amount of information effectively at once. Beyond this threshold, additional thinking doesn't create clarity. It generates confusion. The relationship between thought and productivity follows an inverted U-curve. Some planning and analysis improves performance, but past a certain point, more thinking actively damages results. This explains why you might spend hours perfecting a plan only to feel too mentally exhausted to execute it effectively. Your mind naturally gravitates toward excessive thinking because it creates an illusion of progress. Planning, analyzing, and reviewing feel like productive activities, but they often serve as sophisticated forms of procrastination. The brain prefers the familiar territory of thought over the uncertainty of action. Understanding this dynamic transforms how you approach tasks and goals. Rather than exhausting yourself with endless mental preparation, you can learn to recognize when thinking becomes counterproductive. This isn't about eliminating thought. It's about using it as a precise tool rather than letting it dominate your entire approach to accomplishment. The most effective performers across fields maintain what sports psychologists call optimal mind, a state of relaxed readiness where thoughts serve action rather than impede it. They engage in focused planning when necessary, but spend most of their energy on direct engagement with the task at hand. This responsive approach to productivity aligns with how your brain naturally operates at peak efficiency. When you're fully absorbed in implementing rather than constantly stopping to analyze and second guess, you access flow states where action becomes effortless and time seems to disappear. The key lies in distinguishing between productive planning and excessive thinking. Productive planning creates clear next steps and then releases the mind to focus on implementation. Excessive thinking continually interrupts action to revisit decisions, explore new possibilities, or perfect existing plans. Your most effective moments likely occur when thinking steps back and allows natural competence to emerge. Athletes call this letting the game come to you. Artists describe it as letting the work flow through them. This state becomes accessible when you stop overthinking and trust your inherent capabilities. Success comes not from forcing your mind into constant analysis, but from developing the wisdom to know when thinking serves progress and when it hinders it. This requires recognizing that clarity often emerges from action rather than thought, that doing often provides better answers than endless planning. The path to greater productivity begins with understanding that your relationship with thought determines your effectiveness more than the quantity of your mental activity. When you stop treating every task as a problem requiring extensive analysis, you free up enormous mental resources for actual accomplishment. This shift transforms procrastination, perfectionism, and performance anxiety from seemingly intractable challenges into natural consequences of an overthinking mind. The solution lies not in thinking your way out, but in recognizing when to let thinking step aside so action can flow naturally. Your mind's tendency to analyze and reanalyze becomes not a personal failing, but a habit that has outgrown its usefulness, like a security system so sensitive it triggers false alarms. As you learn to distinguish between productive contemplation and circular thinking, tasks that once felt overwhelming begin to appear manageable. The weight of perpetual analysis lifts, revealing a natural capacity for fluid, effective action that has always existed beneath the mental chatter. Chapter 15: The Creativity Channel. Your most profound creative breakthroughs likely arrived not through logical analysis, but in moments of mental quietude. Perhaps during a shower, while walking in nature, or upon waking from sleep. Scientific research consistently shows that transformative insights emerge when the analytical mind temporarily subsides rather than during periods of intense conscious thinking. Neuroscience reveals why this pattern holds true across all creative domains. When your mind relaxes its grip on analytical thought, different neural networks activate, particularly the default mode network, creating conditions that allow novel connections between previously isolated concepts. This biological shift explains why forcing creativity through willpower typically fails while insights flow naturally during states of relaxed attention. Your brain operates through two distinct but complementary creative modes. The generating mind opens to new possibilities without judgment, while the evaluating mind assesses and refines these raw materials. Most creative blocks occur when you confuse these functions, attempting to simultaneously generate and evaluate. This is like trying to plant seeds while continuously digging them up to check their progress. Nothing can take root. Think of your creative intelligence as a radio signal that broadcasts continuously. The analytical mind, while essential for many tasks, creates static that drowns out this deeper frequency. The signal doesn't need to be strengthened. It requires only a reduction in mental noise to become clear. This explains why breakthrough insights often arrive during activities that naturally quiet the thinking mind, like exercise or meditation. This understanding transforms how you approach creative challenges. Rather than forcing solutions through more thinking, you can learn to access the natural creative intelligence that exists beyond analytical thought. This isn't about eliminating thinking, but about recognizing when it serves versus hinders the creative process. The pressure to produce often triggers precisely the wrong response, intensifying analytical thinking when you most need to access non-analytical resources. You likely recognize this pattern. The harder you try to force creativity, the more elusive it becomes. Yet when you temporarily step back from effortful thinking, solutions often emerge spontaneously. Modern culture's emphasis on productivity can make it feel counterintuitive or even irresponsible to step back from analytical thinking. However, research consistently shows that periods of mental rest are not breaks from the creative process, but essential components of it. During these apparent downtimes, your brain actively processes information and generates novel connections below the threshold of conscious awareness. This deeper creative intelligence operates like a sophisticated pattern recognition system, synthesizing information in ways the analytical mind cannot match. When you allow this system to work without interference, it often produces insights that feel like they arrived, rather than were deliberately constructed. Creative receptivity requires developing a different relationship with your mind, learning to trust and create space for insights rather than trying to force them through willpower. This involves recognizing the signs of overthinking and having specific practices ready to shift into more receptive states. The key lies in alternating between generating and evaluating modes, rather than trying to engage both simultaneously. When generating, temporarily suspend all judgment and allow ideas to emerge without immediate analysis. Only later, during designated evaluation periods, engage the analytical mind to refine and develop these raw materials. Learning to access this deeper creative intelligence doesn't require mastering new skills, but rather removing the thought-created obstacles that block your natural creative capacity. Every human mind possesses this ability. The challenge lies not in developing it, but in clearing the path for its natural expression. The biological foundation for this approach becomes clear when examining how the brain processes information during different mental states. Research shows that creative insights often emerge when the neurology shifts from focused attention to more diffuse awareness, allowing broader pattern recognition and novel associations. This physiological shift explains why creative breakthroughs rarely arrive through force, but emerge naturally when the conditions are right. Understanding this mechanism helps you work with rather than against your brain's natural creative processes. Just as water flows effortlessly downhill when obstacles are removed, your creative insights surface organically when mental barriers dissolve. The harder you try to force creativity, the more it retreats. But create the right inner environment of receptive awareness, and ideas bubble up from your deeper intelligence with surprising ease. This isn't mystical thinking, but a reflection of how your brain naturally processes information when freed from the constraining effects of analytical overthinking. Chapter 16. The Comparison Trap. You've likely experienced this, completing a project you felt proud of, only to have that satisfaction evaporate instantly upon seeing someone else's seemingly superior achievement. In that moment, your actual accomplishment didn't change, but your experience of it transformed completely through the simple act of comparison-based thinking. This thought mechanism operates with ruthless efficiency in modern life. Social media platforms provide endless opportunities for comparison, each scroll potentially triggering thoughts that transform contentment into inadequacy within seconds. The mind developed this comparison capacity as a survival advantage for group living, helping our ancestors gauge their relative standing and adapt accordingly. But in today's interconnected world, this once useful tool has become a source of persistent suffering. Consider how comparison thoughts function like a rigged game, one where the finish line automatically moves further away each time you approach it. You get the promotion you've worked toward for years, but thoughts immediately shift to colleagues who advanced faster. You complete a creative project, but thoughts fixate on others whose work seems more innovative. You reach a fitness goal, but thoughts highlight someone who achieved more dramatic results. The suffering this creates proves particularly insidious because it operates independently of actual circumstances or achievement. High achievers often experience this pattern even more intensely, their thought-based inadequacy growing in proportion to their accomplishments. Each new height reached simply provides a broader view of all the higher mountains yet to climb. Research in social psychology demonstrates how comparison thoughts create arbitrary standards that can never provide lasting satisfaction. Studies show that people's subjective well-being often correlates more strongly with their perceived relative standing than with objective measures of success or material conditions. Your thoughts can make you feel inadequate despite abundant evidence of capability and achievement. This pattern runs so deep that many mistake these comparison thoughts for reality itself, believing their sense of inadequacy reflects an objective truth rather than a thought-created interpretation. But closer examination reveals that these assessments have no fixed reference point. They continuously recalibrate based on whatever comparison the mind happens to focus on in any given moment. Social media amplifies this effect by curating highlights from countless lives into an endless stream of comparison triggers. Each post potentially activates thoughts that transform your current experience from satisfying to insufficient. The mind moves so quickly from observation to comparison that the two seem inseparable, making it difficult to recognize the thought-based nature of the inadequacy. Yet this very recognition, that inadequacy emerges from thoughts rather than reality, contains the key to freedom from this pattern. When you recognize comparison as a thought process rather than an accurate assessment, You create space to question its authority over your experience. This doesn't mean eliminating all comparison. That would neither be possible nor desirable. Healthy inspiration and learning from others serve important functions in growth and development. The critical distinction lies in how comparison thoughts are held, whether they become absolute measures of worth or are recognized as optional perspectives that may or may not be useful in specific contexts. The path forward involves developing the capacity to notice comparison thoughts as they arise, recognizing them as mental events rather than reality. This creates space to consciously choose whether to engage with the comparison or return attention to direct experience and personal values. This shift becomes possible through what we might call sufficiency practice, intentionally orienting attention toward the inherent completeness of the present moment, rather than thought-created evaluations against external standards. This doesn't deny room for growth and improvement, but grounds that growth in actual experience, rather than comparison-based inadequacy. The practice begins with noticing comparison triggers in daily life, moments when thoughts suddenly transform your experience through comparison. By identifying these patterns, you develop the capacity to recognize them as they occur, rather than getting unconsciously caught in their grip. The next step involves consciously redirecting attention from comparison thoughts to direct experience, the actual qualities and characteristics of whatever you're doing or creating, rather than how it compares to others. This creates space for authentic appreciation and discernment, independent of comparison-based evaluation. Values provide essential guidance in this process, offering stable reference points based on what matters most to you, rather than shifting external standards. When choices and assessments align with personal values rather than comparison thoughts, you create the conditions for sustainable motivation and meaningful growth. Chapter 17. The Patience Pathway. Time consistently emerges as one of the most challenging dimensions of human experience, not because of time itself, but because of our thoughts about how quickly things should happen. Consider two responses to an unexpected flight delay. One person paces anxiously, repeatedly checking their watch, mentally rehearsing all the disruptions this will cause, and growing increasingly agitated. Another remains calmly seated, using the time to catch up on reading, make a few calls, or simply rest. The circumstance hasn't changed, but their experiences differ dramatically based on their relationship with timing. This difference illuminates a fundamental truth about impatience. It emerges not from actual circumstances, but from thought-created demands about how quickly life should unfold. When reality fails to match these mental timelines, the resulting resistance generates unnecessary suffering while providing no benefit. The mind creates an alternative version of events that seems more right than what's actually occurring, then wages an exhausting battle against the present moment. Understanding the mechanics of impatience reveals its futile nature. Like repeatedly pulling up a plant to check its roots, our resistance to natural timing often impedes the very processes we're trying to accelerate. This manifests in countless ways: obsessively checking email while waiting for an important response, ruminating about why someone hasn't yet replied to a message, or mentally rushing through the present moment to get to some imagined better future. Modern culture intensifies this challenge through constant reinforcement of instant gratification. When many needs can be met with a few clicks, patience becomes an increasingly foreign concept. Yet certain processes, whether personal growth, relationship development, or creative projects, operate on natural timelines that cannot be accelerated regardless of our desires. The essential skill lies in distinguishing between situations requiring action and those requiring acceptance. Some delays legitimately need intervention. A project falling behind schedule, an unresponsive service provider, or a medical issue requiring follow-up. Others represent natural processes that must unfold in their own time. Grief processing, skill development, or building trust in relationships. Confusing these categories creates unnecessary suffering through either fighting uncontrollable circumstances or passively accepting situations that could be changed. This distinction often gets misunderstood as suggesting that patience means passive resignation. True patience represents engaged waiting, remaining present and prepared while allowing natural processes to unfold. It means distinguishing between productive action and futile resistance, between necessary intervention and counterproductive forcing. Technology has profoundly impacted our relationship with timing, creating unprecedented opportunities for both connection and impatience. Social media platforms condition us to expect immediate responses, while messaging apps create pressure for instant replies. These tools offer valuable benefits, but can also generate thought patterns that transform neutral waiting periods into sources of anxiety and frustration. The paradox of timing reveals itself clearly in creative and personal growth endeavors. Forcing creative work rarely produces quality results, yet showing up consistently proves essential. Pushing too hard in physical training often leads to injury, but regular practice remains crucial. The skill lies in finding the balance between engaged effort and allowing natural timing, between doing and being. Time perception itself varies dramatically based on our thought patterns. 10 minutes spent in resistance feels eternally longer than the same period in acceptance. An hour of engaged presence can pass remarkably quickly, while 60 minutes of impatient waiting can feel like an eternity. This reveals how our experience of time emerges largely from our thoughts about it, rather than its actual passage. Many of life's most significant processes operate on timelines beyond our control. Healing from loss, developing wisdom, or building meaningful relationships. These areas particularly highlight the futility of resistance to natural timing. No amount of mental pushing can accelerate grief processing or force trust to develop faster. Yet remaining engaged while respecting these natural rhythms allows the processes to unfold optimally. The ability to distinguish between controllable and uncontrollable timing becomes increasingly valuable in a world of constant urgency. Some deadlines genuinely matter and require focused action. Others represent arbitrary thought-created pressures that generate unnecessary stress without providing benefit. Developing this discernment allows for appropriate response rather than automatic reaction to timing challenges. You'll find that many of your most pressing time pressures exist primarily in your mind, self-imposed expectations disconnected from genuine necessity. When you pause to examine these pressures objectively, you often discover that the true timeline is more flexible than your anxious thoughts suggest. This awareness creates space to engage more skillfully with timing, honoring real constraints while releasing artificial ones that only serve to amplify stress. The difference lies not in the clock itself, but in your relationship to it. Chapter 18. The Self-Compassion Bridge. Research consistently demonstrates a counterintuitive truth about human performance and growth. Self-criticism, despite its intended motivational effects, consistently undermines the very outcomes it aims to improve. Studies across diverse domains, from academic achievement to athletic performance to relationship satisfaction, reveal that individuals who respond to setbacks with self-compassion significantly outperform those who default to harsh self-judgment. When facing a challenging goal, self-compassionate individuals show greater persistence, more consistent effort, and higher ultimate achievement than their self-critical counterparts. This reflects a profound reality about how change actually occurs in human psychology. While the mind instinctively tries to force improvement through internal criticism and judgment, this approach creates an adversarial relationship with yourself that consumes the very resources needed for genuine growth. Every moment spent in self-attack depletes the emotional and cognitive energy required for meaningful progress. Consider how your mind responds when you fall short of an important goal or make a significant mistake. The automatic cascade of self-critical thoughts. I should have known better. I'll never get this right. What's wrong with me? Feels like it's helping by highlighting the problem and motivating change. But this mental self-flagellation actually creates a state of internal threat and defensiveness that makes lasting transformation nearly impossible. The psychological mechanics behind this pattern reveal why self-criticism fails despite its intuitive appeal. When thoughts repeatedly attack aspects of your experience or behavior, they trigger the threat response system, flooding your body with stress hormones and activating primitive defense mechanisms. This physiological state of threat and defense prevents access to the higher brain functions needed for learning, growth, and intentional change. Self-critical thoughts essentially create an internal war, dividing your psychological resources between attacking and defending parts. This civil conflict depletes the energy and attention needed to actually understand and address whatever challenge you're facing. It's like trying to repair a complex machine while simultaneously beating it with a hammer. The added damage from judgment makes the original problem harder to solve. Through the lens of neuroscience, self-compassion creates an internal environment of safety that allows the nervous system to shift out of defensive mode into a state of growth and learning. When you respond to difficulties with understanding rather than attack, you maintain access to your full cognitive and emotional resources. This isn't about being soft or lowering standards. It's about creating optimal conditions for real change. Many resist this approach out of fear that self-compassion means self-indulgence or complacency. The evidence shows the opposite. Self-compassionate individuals demonstrate higher standards, greater willingness to acknowledge mistakes, and more consistent effort toward goals than those driven by self-criticism. They can look at their limitations and failures more honestly because they're not afraid of their own harsh judgment. The distinction between self-compassion and self-indulgence becomes clear through deeper examination. True self-compassion means bringing warm, engaged attention to your struggles while maintaining commitment to growth. It's not about making excuses or avoiding responsibility. It's about creating an internal relationship that supports rather than sabotages your development. The transformative power of self-compassion emerges through this fundamental shift in how you relate to your experience. Rather than trying to force change through judgment and criticism, you create space for natural growth through acceptance and understanding. This doesn't mean liking or wanting difficult situations, but rather acknowledging reality as it is so you can respond effectively rather than react defensively. When you move from thought-based judgment to compassionate acceptance, you stop wasting energy fighting against what is and can direct that energy toward constructive change. This represents the culmination of developing a responsive relationship with thoughts. Rather than letting critical thoughts drive your behavior, you maintain connection with the deeper wisdom that emerges through acceptance. The research demonstrates this across contexts. Students who respond to academic setbacks with self-compassion show better study habits and test scores than those who berate themselves over mistakes. Athletes who practice self-compassion after poor performances return to peak form faster than those who respond with self-criticism. Individuals working on health behavior changes maintain consistent effort longer when they respond to inevitable slip-ups with understanding rather than judgment. Conclusion. Your journey through these chapters represents more than the completion of a book. It marks a profound shift in how you relate to the most influential force in your life, your own mind. Through exploring the space between stimulus and response, you've uncovered a fundamental truth that changes everything. Thoughts, no matter how compelling, are optional interpretations rather than absolute reality. Consider what you now understand that wasn't clear when you began. You've seen how thoughts create an illusory emergency that hijacks attention from the present moment. You've discovered that emotional reactions persist not because of initial triggers, but through thought patterns that keep resetting the emotional thermostat. You've experienced resistance to what generates unnecessary suffering, while acceptance creates space for genuine change. Think of your mind as a sophisticated control room with multiple stations: thought generation, emotional processing, sensory awareness, and direct response. While all these stations operate simultaneously, attention can only be directed to one at a time. When attention becomes imprisoned at the thought station, all other capacities become subordinate to its interpretations and demands. But you now know this arrangement isn't fixed. Attention can be redirected to the response center where wisdom beyond thought becomes accessible. This redirect isn't about achieving a permanent state of thought-free presence. Such an expectation would only create another thought-based standard to fall short of. Instead, this journey develops your recovery capacity, the ability to notice when thoughts have hijacked attention and gently return to responsive presence. This capacity strengthens each time you catch yourself in reaction and choose to pause. Each time you question a limiting thought pattern, each time you respond with presence, rather than react from conditioning. The four foundational principles you've explored form the cornerstones of this transformation. First, thoughts are tools meant to serve rather than masters to obey. Their power comes from attention, not inherent authority. Second, the response gap exists in every moment, even when thoughts create the illusion of automatic reaction. Third, responsive presence is your natural state, not something to achieve, but something to remember when thought patterns create the illusion of separation. Fourth, self-compassion accelerates rather than hinders this journey by creating the internal safety needed for genuine change. Your completion of this book demonstrates both your commitment to growth and your capacity for transformation. Perhaps you've already noticed subtle shifts, moments of responding where you would have previously reacted, challenges met with presence rather than resistance, thoughts recognized as optional rather than compelling. These changes, however small they may seem, represent the awakening of your natural capacity for freedom beyond thought. Remember, your mind was designed to be your most powerful ally, not your persistent adversary. In reclaiming ownership of your relationship with thought, you haven't just learned a new skill. You've remembered a fundamental truth about your nature that has been waiting patiently for your return. You've remembered a fundamental truth about your nature that has been waiting patiently for your return.